We are excited to work with such a diverse group of professionals as we begin the procurement process. Next slide, please. To begin with, I'd like to introduce our panel today, starting with our director, Chuck Podolak. I am Brenda Prevost, WIFA's Senior Procurement Officer. Next is WIFA's General Counsel, Joe Satelli, and our technical advisor, Jason Fort from HDR Engineering. And in the audience is Ted Cook, board member, and is the chairman for the Long-Term Water Augmentation Committee. Our primary objective today is to foster an open and transparent dialogue between all potential proposers and the WIFA team, and to ensure that each of you is equipped with the knowledge you need to submit a comprehensive and competitive proposal. Today's meeting will also provide an opportunity to gain clarity in the long-term water augmentation solicitation requirements, to explain the procurement process, and to explain navigating the procurement portal. Also, we will address questions that you might have and discuss the timelines and next steps to ensure that we all are on the same page as we move forward. There's going to be a lot of information shared here today, and we welcome you to ask questions after the meeting or at the end of our meeting, and submit your questions in writing either to the procurement@azwifa.gov email or in the procurement portal in the submit a question quick link. We will review that, how to do that shortly. Next slide, please. The procurement portal is the official source and location of all solicitation documents. What you will need will be found here. All contact with WIFA shall be directed to the procurement officer, and that would be me. All official communication must be made in writing via email or in the Q&A form, etc. And to note, verbal communication is not binding. And with that, I'll turn it over to Chuck to discuss some background information.
Thanks, Brenda. So my goal for the next few minutes is to provide a little bit of background, Chelsea can go next, about why we are where we are, what the thought process that got us to this place is. What I want to talk about is really nothing new. I would describe it as a high-level summary, which is essentially a distillation of a lot of what the WIFA board has talked about in previous public comments and meetings. All of our board and committee meetings are public meetings that are recorded and available up on our website. So I would encourage anyone who wants to know more about this background context to go back and look at some of our previous meetings. If you go to the next slide. To step way back, what are we doing? Why are we doing this? Arizona overall, our water outlook right now is good, but we know that there's been a number of studies, both at the federal level and the state level, that have shown that demand in Arizona is projected to increase. The history of Arizona water has been forward planning of planning and taking care of things before they become a crisis issue. We try and start well before the need is there. And so what we are doing is building on some of these previous estimates about what the demand in Arizona would look like for the next 50 to 100 years. Statewide, over a 100-year or 50-year cycle, we think there might be as much as 1.5 million acre-feet of increased demand relative to today, statewide across all sectors. If we zoom in a little bit, which WIFA has done, and look at the major water users in central Arizona over a nearer time frame, 10 to 15 years, we believe that there's somewhere between 100,000 to 500,000 acre-feet a year of increased supply that is needed, and that is on top of actions that are already planned elsewhere in the state, more shorter and medium-term actions. That type of demand varies. There are some users, there's some demand in those numbers that represents short-term or interruptible supplies. There's a decent amount of that demand that is that needs high priority, constant deliveries, and for the most part, the water quality associated with those demand numbers are for municipal and industrial uses. So that's the overall picture. We know that there will be additional water needed or we believe there will be additional water needed in Arizona over the next decade or two. If you go to the next page, WIFA's role in meeting that. WIFA's role is not necessarily to meet all the demand in all sectors over the entire state of Arizona. Participation with WIFA is completely voluntary, and there are other water resource projects going on in the state of Arizona right now. In 2022, though, the legislature and the governor at the time determined that there was a role for the public sector in starting to meet some of that anticipated new demand. In 2022, some of these new functions were added. Those new functions are looking at long-term water augmentation, looking at rural water utility assistance, and increased investment in conservation. It was added to an existing successful agency of WIFA. With those new authorities, it's largely we've evolved into largely a very new organization. Our new organization, these new functions have a lot of flexibility. There are strong parallels in the 2022 enacting legislation to some of the flexibility that Arizona Department of Transportation, or ADOT, enjoys in terms of the ability and the flexibility to procure projects with a variety of different sources. We, in the 2022 legislation, it also made WIFA an independent state agency. So we are part of the executive branch of the state of Arizona. We are governed by an independent appointed board that serves fixed terms. That gives some independence from the legislature and the governor. It gives some measure of stability in how we make our decisions. We are a public body. Our board and committees are public bodies, are subject to open meeting laws. On top of what's statutorily required, WIFA has made a strong organizational commitment to transparency and public input. To that end, you can go to our website. You can look at any of our meetings over the last 2 years. You can look at all the meeting materials. You can look at all the recordings of those meetings. And we try and make that very, very open to the public, both in advance and then in retrospect. We've met with the board. We've talked about augmentation over the last year and a half. We realize that augmentation is not necessarily synonymous with importation, but what the legislature gave us a strong direction in our enacting legislation that of the money that they were going to appropriate over the first 3 years of WIFA's long-term water augmentation fund, they wanted at least 75% of that, not less than 75% of that, was to pursue importation projects. It was augmenting our water supply by bringing new water in from outside the boundaries of the state of Arizona. The state's initial commitment to this back in 2022 was to invest $1 billion in that long-term water augmentation fund over a 3-year period. The first installment in the first year was put in through changes in elected officials and changes in the state budget outlook. That initial planned $1 billion investment has not fully materialized. WIFA currently has just shy of $500 million in the long-term water augmentation fund to be used for these purposes. WIFA has been very active and very vocal in talking about what these shortfalls mean, about talking about what WIFA can and can't do with $445 million relative to $1 billion. I feel we've had some success working with the current elected officials in expressing support for WIFA, saying we do not necessarily need to make more investments in the long-term water augmentation fund right now, that we can still undertake all the initial activities that we are doing right now and work with the state elected officials at a later point when we have better clarity over what additional public investments will be needed for the long-term water augmentation fund. You go to the next slide. So we know that we are trying to pursue a long-term water augmentation fund project. The way the solicitation that we're talking about today is part of that. We have a lot of options. We have a lot of flexibility with this statutory authority. We've spent a good part of the first half of this year having very open public discussions with our board about various ways to use WIFA's authorities and money. There was a clear desire by our board to use the creativity of the market rather than having a board decision about specific locations, technologies, volumes, project delivery vehicles, physical water or water delivery technologies. WIFA is interested in in terms of the industry's different viewpoints on the best way to accomplish any of those technologies, water sources, project delivery vehicles, physical water delivery mechanisms. We undertook this three-phase process that I'll talk about in a second as an attempt to balance risk between the public and private sector, to put the risk where it's best suited. We are open to a variety of different options. We are hoping to get a variety of different options from the private sector. We are looking to get those options from qualified project teams. What we want to do at the end of this solicitation is to have promising concepts advocated for by multifunctional teams that have a demonstrated success in delivering large projects. You go to the next slide. This is essentially the first phase of what we see as a three-phase process. The solicitation, the process that's governed by a solicitation document that you have is really phase one of this process. Is a competitive procurement process that has all the hallmarks of a public agency going and doing a competitive solicitation. At the end of that solicitation, we plan to issue one or more base contracts to those fully formed teams that have a concept that we've deemed as appropriate for more investigation. And that's what happens in phase two. In phase two, those teams, which were the successful awardees of the competitive solicitation of procurement, will move on to working under contract with WIFA under base contracts in a task order process. Task orders that will involve a fairly public process by our board to govern the types of things that we will pay the base contract holders to evaluate, including technical, environmental, cultural, regulatory, society, community, economics, and financing aspects of the proposals. Those will, like I said, will all be done in a very public way. Our goal is at the end of that phase two is to have enough information for each of those concepts that we're evaluating to allow WIFA, likely in conjunction with a NEPA process, to select one or more of the projects to move forward with. That would involve moving into phase three, which is the project development. These are all the agreements, pre-development agreements, final agreements, construction operation to actually bring the water online. So I want to reiterate, we view that it is our hope that the team that is actually delivering a project or projects at the end of phase three are those same teams that are competing in this solicitation. So this is not a solicitation for ideas among developers who then build on teams, but we want to have those teams identified as part of this solicitation. That should be clear in the procurement document. You go to the next slide. Finally, getting to the end of phase three and having a line on a successful water importation project is worthless without someone to use that water. So we know that a key part, a fundamental part of a successful project is to have committed offtake at the end of a project. Participation in this project is completely voluntary. There is no compulsory participation by any water user in Arizona. At the same time that WIFA is interacting with you, the industry who will help develop those new water supplies, WIFA is interacting with the potential users in Arizona. We are serving as that conduit in parallel to working with you all. We don't know yet what WIFA's ultimate role will be between the water project or projects and the off-takers at the end. But for right now, WIFA is the one working with both the developers and the water users to figure out what that ultimate relationship will be at the end. I think I'll turn over, Brenda. That's essentially my high-level concept, our ideas about why we got here and some of the reasons why the things are in the procurement document that you have in front of you. I think we're saving questions at the end, so I'll just turn it back to Brenda on some more specifics.
Thanks, Chuck. Next slide, please. Well, we're here at the solicitation procedures. Next slide, please. I'm going to briefly go through the steps that are outlined in this chart. There's 12 steps, and we'll go through them relatively quickly. First, of course, is the issuing of our solicitation. As you know, the long-term water augmentation solicitation was opened and on the street as of November 20th, and we are so excited. As always, it's important that you thoroughly review the entire solicitation to ensure that you understand what is being requested, timelines, as well as how your proposal will be evaluated. Step 2. Now that the solicitation has been issued, the next step for our potential proposers is to submit an initial qualification submittal, IQS. I will be reviewing the procurement portal with you shortly, and we'll guide you where you need to go to submit your IQS. Please note, be sure to review the requirements of the IQS thoroughly and submit all your documents as requested. That's just a procurement professional's note. Step 3, the IQS then allows us to evaluate and assess whether a potential proposer meets the basic eligibility based on responsiveness, responsibility, and minimum qualification criteria. Step 4, once completed, the IQS will then establish qualified proposers, or QPs. We will notify all qualified proposers. This notification will be formal, and we will include information on next steps in the process. From this point, proposal teams can be established who will then be able to submit a proposal. Step 5, qualified proposers are then eligible for one-on-one meetings with WIFA and our technical advisors. The purpose of these interviews is to clarify any outstanding questions or details that we may require. Step 6, at this stage, qualified proposers can then submit an offer. I will speak more on this in the upcoming slides as we review the process of submitting a proposal. Step 7, WIFA will then evaluate proposals. And again, this will be based on responsiveness, responsibility, and minimum qualification requirements and criteria. Step 8, the evaluation will be established an initial competitive range. And in step 9, qualified proposers who are within the initial competitive range will then be notified. In step 10, interviews will then be conducted with proposers within the initial competitive range. This is your opportunity to clarify details of your proposal, present your approach, and answer any questions our evaluation team may have. Step 11, following the interviews, we enter into the phase of negotiation and request of best and final offer, or BAFOs, for those teams within competitive range. This is a critical phase where we engage in discussions with our qualified proposers to refine their offers. It also gives us a chance to confirm that the proposer's approach aligns and can meet with the requirements of the solicitation. And step 12, the final step in the solicitation process, is the recommendation to award. After the negotiations and the submission of the best and final offer, our evaluation team will review all the information and make recommendations for award to the Long-Term Water Augmentation Fund Committee, who will then present their recommendations of award to the board. The board will make the final decision on which teams will be awarded. The selected teams will be notified of award, and once the award is made, we will notify all proposers of the outcome. Next slide, please. Solicitation timeline. To note, the timeline is not an exhaustive list, but outlines key dates. And here in a quick review, solicitation obviously was issued on November 20th, 2024, and we are now at the pre-offer conference on December 10th, 2024. The deadline for the IQS questions and comments submissions is December 17th, 2024. The IQS submission date is for January 16th, 2025. Notification of qualified proposers is January 30th, 2025. Deadlines for questions and comments for qualified proposers is February 13th, 2025. Our one-on-one meetings with qualified proposers is scheduled for February 27th, 2025. Qualified proposers offers due on April 10th, 2025. Interviews and demonstrations with qualified proposers in competitive range is May 22nd, 2025. And recommendation for award is June 26th, 2025. Next slide, please. The Long-Term Water Augmentation Fund website and solicitation documents. How do I access this? Well, to access the Long-Term Water Augmentation Fund solicitation, please log into the LTWAF.az.wifa.gov website. And once you're there, you can find at the top of the menu bar the solicitation. You will be able to download the solicitation documents here by clicking the center blue box. You will also see announcements here as well. Also, please be sure to see the solicitation 2024-001 Amendment 1 that has been posted under solicitation amendments. Next slide, please. Also on this page, you will be able to request access to the procurement portal by choosing the third blue box, Procurement Portal Access Request. Click the box. You will then be directed to the access form. Please complete the form, and once submitted, you will receive a confirmation email. Within 48 hours, you will receive the second email with a link to the procurement portal. Note, access is limited to two representatives per company. Here's a quick review with some additional information. Next slide, please. And if we could.
How do I get access to the procurement portal? First, you will need to log on to https://ltwaf.azwifa.gov. Once there, hover to the menu at the top and click on Solicitation. Under the solicitation page, you'll find a blue box that says Procurement Portal Access Request. Click the box and you'll be directed to the access form. It's important to note here that access is limited to 2 representatives per company. This is to limit the potential for duplicate access. Click Start Now and fill out the form with your name, company, title, and email address. Once you submit this form, you will receive an email confirming that your submission has been received. Within 48 hours, you will receive another email with a link to the procurement portal, followed by a secondary link to your company-specific solicitation folder.
Next slide, please. Next, you can access the procurement portal login by either clicking the link that was emailed to you or by going to the Long-Term Water Augmentation LTWAF.az.wifa.gov solicitation and navigating to the procurement portal login at the top of the menu bar. You can also bookmark this for easy access. Next slide, please. Procurement portal general navigation. Well, now you're in the procurement portal. You will be on the procurement portal homepage when it opens up, and from here you'll be able to access several quick links in the solicitation documents, forms, and amendments. Next page, please. In the solicitation document quick link box, you'll find the full solicitation documents and where you will be able to access forms, rules, and more. Next slide, please. From this homepage, you can also access forms from the form quick link box. Next slide, please. You will also be able to access amendments from this quick link box as well. Next slide, please. From the home page, you will also be able to submit a question in the quick link box. Click the box and fill out the form to submit a question. Please note, questions are either to be submitted to the procurement@azwifa.gov email or here at the procurement portal in Submit a Question quick link box. The Q&A responses quick link box will be added to the homepage shortly. Jason and his team will take care of that. This will contain all the questions and answers that have been submitted. This will ensure a fair and competitive bidding process, preventing any single developer from gaining an unfair advantage, thus upholding the integrity of the procurement process and allowing all potential proposers to submit proposals based on the same information and guidance. Again, here's a quick review. Next slide, please.
How do I navigate the procurement portal? You can either click the direct link to the procurement portal that was emailed to you, or log on to the Long-Term Water Augmentation Fund website at https://ltwaf.azwifa.gov. On the LTWAF website, hover to the menu at the top and click on Procurement Portal Login. To find specific documents, look for the Quick Link section and click on Solicitation Documents. In this section, you will find form templates, amendments, and more. You can also read the full document containing solicitation instructions, rules, and qualifications. You can also find form templates and amendments directly on the homepage. Just click on Solicitation Forms or Amendments under the Quick Links section. If you have any questions, click on Submit a Question and fill out the form.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Moving on now to the procurement portal IQS upload. In the main menu of the procurement portal, you will be able to click on the company-specific folder, your company-specific folder, on the left-hand side of the portal. You will find a folder labeled Initial Qualification Submittal IQS. Click the folder to find another folder labeled IQS Submission Upload. Once there, you will be able to upload your IQS documents. To upload, click the Upload button at the top left of the menu bar in the folder. All uploaded files must be PDF format. To note, you will only be able to access your company's specific folder and will not see any other proposer's folder information. If your team is submitting an IQS, only one submission will be allowed. To do this, you can either create a new user entity or you can upload under your company's folder. Either way works. Here's a quick review. Next slide, please.
How can I upload my initial qualification submittal, or IQS? In the main menu in the procurement portal, click on your company-specific folder on the left-hand side of the portal. Once in the folder, you should see a folder labeled Initial Qualification Submittal, IQS. Simply click the folder and you will see another folder labeled IQS Submission Upload. Once in that folder, you will be able to upload your IQS either as a single file or individual files. Any uploaded files must be in PDF format. To upload, click the Upload button at the top left menu bar in the folders, select your files, and hit Open. Once done, you should see the file in your folders and your upload should be complete.
Thank you.
Before you jump, Brenda, before you jump into questions, just a couple of things if I could add. Oh, sorry, turn my green light on. If I could add just a couple of quick things. We will be posting those helpful little videos to the WIFA website in case you didn't keep track of all the clicks necessary for all the access things. So we'll put those up on the WIFA website for future reference as you need it. Second, and Brenda did touch on this, excuse me, a bit. We will endeavor to keep the information on the WIFA website as current to the best that we're able to. If there, in the case that there is a disagreement between information, the procurement portal is the source of information that governs. All of the official documentation will be maintained through that procurement portal. And finally, and Chuck kind of touched on this a little bit, but WIFA's goal with this solicitation is not to select necessarily one team. WIFA could select 0 teams, 1 team, or multiple teams under each of the potential project categories. This is a competition or a solicitation based on generating qualified teams that are in the position to be able to perform the task orders and potentially look to the future development aspects for projects. It's not necessarily a single selection procurement. So those are just a couple of things I wanted to touch on. Chuck, anything else before we go to questions?
Yeah, just to, I think, build on that, Jason, it should be clear to anyone who's gone back and watched any of our board meeting, their desire is to have phase 2 occur with multiple options. This procurement could end with 0 awards, it could end with 1 award, or it could end up with multiple awards. And I think it's fair to say the board has a strong desire to have multiple competing teams and concepts proceed into phase 2. Joe, anything?
Excellent. Okay, well, now it's time for your questions. Please note, WIFA is not obligated to answer questions in this meeting. However, administration questions, that are referenced in the solicitation, we do want to address. And if you have very specific questions regarding the solicitation, we encourage you to submit those in writing, either through the procurement portal or again to procurement@azwifa.gov, which will come to me. And of course, we will submit those questions for everyone to see shortly. Also, to ensure a productive session, we kindly ask that all participants adhere to the following guidelines. Please focus your asking questions, clarifying questions related to the long-term water augmentation solicitation and any other administrative elements directly associated with the procurement process. Developers should refrain from discussing any technology, concepts, or specific solutions that may be included in a future proposal, as well as sharing any details of your company background or expertise. This session is solely intended for clarifications of this solicitation. Speakers will be allowed 3 minutes, and if you are here in person, please make your way to the podium and turn on the mic. If you're attending virtually, please be sure to raise your hand and the host will allow you to unmute yourself for your comment. And please include your email in the chat. A reminder that official questions must be submitted in writing, either at the procurement@azwifa.gov email or in the procurement portal, submit a question quick link. And now on to your questions. Yes, sir. Can you continue?
And just go ahead and make sure that the little green button on the microphone is turned on. Just gotta push it right.
Turn your button on, sir.
Well, thanks, Chuck. You do everything. Appreciate it. Joe Uhas with Sustainability Partners. We are interested in joining a team, multiple teams. It's not uncommon, as you know, Brenda, to have somewhere on the portal, a place where you can identify yourself and the product or service that you're interested in providing. Is that going to be part of the portal? How can we communicate with prospective teams that potential team members have goods and services to provide as a part of their team?
Excellent question, and thank you for asking. I'm going to defer to you, Jason, on that one.
Sure. At this point, we don't have a specific provision for noting interested parties necessarily as part of the solicitation. That is something that we could evaluate and see if that makes sense. But we'll certainly take it under consideration.
Okay, I would just, at the risk of making a little bit of a commercial, since you're looking for innovative solutions, I would recommend you do that because you don't even know potentially what goods and services are out there. Thank you. So there's a multi-step process to identify the qualified teams. At any point in that process, can the teams change? But I'm particularly interested in, can those teams enhance their team? They've already been selected as one of the qualified proposers. Now they're going through the remaining part of the process. Can their team be enhanced at that point as the process unfolds, or do you have to stick with the team that you came to the dance with?
I think, we can certainly discuss that further, but it's a great question. I do believe that your team can be enhanced as we're going through the project. You may want to add an additional engineer or subject matter experts in that case. And we would certainly take it under advisement and provide that question in writing to everyone. But as it stands now, your teams, as you build your core team, and then of course, any additional subject matter experts can be added.
Okay, I think that's my 2 questions. I might have to come back later though. Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
If I may, on the attendees list, not part of this, but as a preceding action, WIFA had a request for information process in 2023. At an industry forum, we recorded the attendees, the sign-in list for the in-person as well as the online registrants, and we made that list of attendees available. I don't think we'd go down the line of publishing advertising material, but making the list of people who attended and their affiliation. I think that would be consistent with our past practices.
With contact information?
Believe we did.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
Actual full submissions are available.
There, yes.
Rob Simostantek, I have a suggestion, a clarifying question, and then a general question. I guess the suggestion is processes I've been involved in the past, similar to this. You guys are asking for fully formed teams. That's not unusual. And what I've seen done in the past is that the folks that are procuring the teams will actually have like a list of free agents up on their site, and they'll make that contact information available. So somebody like Joe could, could actually, his information could be made available to everybody. And that he's a free agent looking for a team to join. So just a suggestion. Point of clarification. When I read the solicitation, I got the impression that you're not looking for any information on the long-term water importation projects for this initial submission. I want to clarify that. And then my question is specifically around the competitive range. Are you looking for when you're looking at a competitive range, I'm assuming it's $1 per acre foot, and what goes into that, and how are you going to define that? So.
I will do.
Rob, thanks for the question. So the two responses to both questions, again, referring back to the solicitation document, but the IQS, the initial qualification submittal, does not include descriptions of the water importation project. It's minimum qualifications, demonstration of minimum qualifications to continue forward in the proposer process.
It wasn't entirely clear, so let me clarify that.
Yep, and then regarding the second question, the competitive range is developed based on the evaluative criteria that are identified in the solicitation document. So there are points assigned to the various evaluation criteria. There's a lot of. There are 4 evaluative criteria identified in the solicitation document with point allocations to them, and that the evaluation against those evaluative criteria will be used to develop the competitive range.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe one more point of clarification too. I've used the phrase fully formed teams in a sort of shorthand or colloquial to talk about having multiple key aspects of a team represented, key players in financing, operations, construction, et cetera. Fully formed teams does not mean this entire staff listed out for everyone who would all be doing that. So I would refer to the solicitation document itself for the specifics of what that fully formed team actually entails.
Okay, thanks, Joe.
Do we have any online questions, Chelsea? Awesome. Any other questions?
This is quick, I'm sorry. I keep hearing Chuck, fully formed teams. So are the fully formed teams announced in January, or does that remain a non-public bit of information until the process is completed and the teams are actually selected?
So we are using that phrase as a plain language description of the criteria in terms of who the key personnel are that will be submitted as part of an initial qualification statement as well as the proposal.
Okay, I'm sorry. Think about my question earlier when I said, can the teams be enhanced? The teams may want to enhance, but maybe others will be able to determine we can enhance that team. We won't know that unless the teams have been announced. So that's the question. That's what I want to know.
Understood.
Yeah.
So 2 parts to that answer. First, as to whether what you're referring to is the qualified proposers.
Right.
Will the qualified proposers be announced publicly? And I don't want to misspeak, so I'm not going to answer that. We'll refer back to the solicitation document as to whether the qualified proposer team will be publicly announced, or if the qualified proposer team will just be announced to the proposers, and not qualified will be told to the not qualified teams
Completely
as well. So
understood.
the
Okay.
notifications will go to the teams. I'm not sure if there's a public announcement to that or not. We'll have to check the
Sure.
solicitation.
Okay,
document.
great. Thank you.
Second, there are provisions in the solicitation document for changes to project teams. We recognize that these are large teams that are going to come together, and there are changes that happen to those teams, additions, subtractions, just changes in market conditions. So there are provisions in the solicitation for changes to project teams.
Cool. Great. Thank you.
Sorry, Steve Owen, Perk Water and Consolidated Water. Just curious, I saw on one of the slides about 75% of the funding for water brought into the state from outside of the state. What if we can get all the water here in the state, but create a new source of water within the state? So will we not be allowed to get 75% of the money?
So
Does that make sense?
sort of, so let me clarify where the 75% comes from. The 75% is a statutory requirement on WIFA. And so
Okay.
when WIFA is appropriated money over those first 3 years, money approximately totaling $455 million,
Mhm.
WIFA has a restriction on it through state statute that WIFA has to spend at least 75% of that on water importation projects. It's projects that bring water from outside of the state boundaries to inside the state boundaries. That's not a limitation on subsequent contractors. That's a limitation on what WIFA as an entity can spend our money on.
So we have a well thought out and great plan to go forward and bring that forward in our proposal that can be 100% funded through WIFA, right? To develop new sources of water.
So there's maybe two different pieces of that. One is what is the thing that WIFA is actually seeking to solicit through this solicitation, which is a subset of what WIFA can do with its long-term water augmentation fund, which is a subset of what WIFA can do with all of our funds.
Okay.
WIFA does have ability in our long-term water augmentation fund as well as other funds to fund water supply development projects within the state. What WIFA is seeking with this specific solicitation is an imported water project.
Okay, thanks.
And we do have one question online. It's been submitted by an anonymous attendee, so I'll read it and allow you to respond. Can you confirm what types of firms or services are represented or meant by, quote, proposed equity members?
I don't think I would go back to the solicitation. In the solicitation document itself, it defines experience criteria. We do not label those by types of firms or names of firms, but it is anyone who would meet those experience criteria as laid out in the solicitation document.
And I would add, there is actually a definition in the solicitation document of equity member. And just to reiterate what it is, a person or entity that has a direct ownership or legal interest in the contract with WIFA or identified as an equity member. It's effectively a finance component to the project.
Question?
Hi, guys. Brian Hageman with Deluge Technologies. There's a lot of discussion of tasks in immediately in the amendment. And I was wondering, where do the task requests come into the schedule? Is it after the qualified proposer is identified and then tasks can be presented, or is it before?
It would,
Chelsea, can you go back to the three-phase slide?
Just a moment, so I'm not pushing through a bunch of them.
So Brian, if I understand the question, I believe it's over the task orders that.
Yeah, there's a lot of discussion about task orders.
So phase one is the solicitation. Phase one is what is governed by the procurement document or the solicitation itself. At the end of phase one, one or more teams are identified and awarded a base contract. The way that base contract is executed is in phase 2 through a series of task orders. So there's a governing contract, and then WIFA would define what the task order is, essentially a subcomponent of that contract. Activities are undertaken under that task order, and then additional task orders are issued. So it's really the vehicle by which the work in phase 2 is done. So the task orders are not a component of the solicitation or in that phase 1. It's a feature of the follow-on phases after the solicitation is complete.
So are you said the task orders are generated by WIFA, or are they generated by the developer with the submittal of funding request for that task, or steps along the way?
I believe it's section 10 is the form of the base contract. The form of the base contract is included as a procurement, and that base contract would be what governs phase 2, including the task orders. And so the actual mechanism is spelled out in that form of the base contract as to how WIFA and the contractee would interact in the execution of those task orders.
Another question on that is, well, during that task phase, do we request WIFA's participation further in the task? I know you mentioned you weren't sure how the coordination of WIFA will be in the water purchase agreements. Do we ask in those tasks or request that the involvement, we would like to see WIFA involved in more or less? That happens during phase 2.
What we've talked about in public meetings is the advantage of this multi-step process. It allows WIFA to participate in different ways under different proposals. Under some water importation project proposals, WIFA may have one role that is different than in another role. And in the execution of those task orders, that can be tailored towards the needs in each of those.
Okay, back to the initial solicitation, the initial qualification team that will be submitted first. There's about 10, 12 items that you request. Can we add on more PDFs to that, including more topics about the projects?
The evaluation in the initial qualifications will be limited to whether the minimum criteria listed for initial qualifications are met. So any additional or supplemental material, I guess, wouldn't be evaluated except in so much as it's a demonstration of meeting those minimum qualification criteria.
Okay.
As Jason pointed out on a previous question, for example, the details of the water importation project or proposal that would be part of an offer are not included in the evaluation initial qualification statement.
Should be included in the proposal that you submit in the second phase.
In phase 2?
Yes. If your IQS has been, your team, your submitted has been evaluated, and you are now invited to go to the next step in the process, in that proposal that you and your team will be creating, that's when you would want to include all of the additional information.
Okay. If a company wants to have multiple projects looked at, we're submitting multiple initial qualification for each project, or how does that work? If there's multiple projects we want to have evaluated, do we in phase 1, step 1, do we just submit one qualification request, or do we do one for each project we want to submit? They'll have different project names and different source water.
I'm going to refer back to the solicitation document. There are provisions in the solicitation document for how to submit for multiple potential water importation projects. So refer back to that rather than us answering off the cuff.
Yeah,
That is spelled out in the.
I saw that. There was one short paragraph that
Yeah.
didn't explain too much, but I expect I'm going to be submitting multiple initial qualification requests.
That would,
Is that,
if the solicitation doesn't provide sufficient guidance, that would be appropriate to submit a question in writing that we would answer in writing and it would go into the procurement record.
thank you very much.
Chelsea, can you go to the multi-step? The one with all the boxes?
The process slide?
Yeah. So just reiterate here, Brian, there are two small tan boxes below the blue boxes. There are two places where things are evaluated. The solicitation should be very clear on what is evaluated in that first step and what is evaluated in that second step. And so I think to your question and an earlier question, the only things that are evaluated in that first step are things that are spelled out in solicitation. Adding things that are above and beyond what is evaluated should have, it doesn't factor into the evaluation. So I would respond to what's asked in that first step with exactly what's being asked for in the solicitation, and the same for the second step.
And maybe to further clarify, for just over clarifying, this entire slide describes phase 1 of the previous slide we said. So all 12 steps here occur in phase 1. Phase 2 happens after the award.
We have another question from an anonymous attendee online. The question is, may an in-state engineering or professional firm be retained and assist multiple different teams or projects? Or must the engineering firm limit its work only to one project or team throughout the entire process?
There is no specification or limitation in the solicitation on the composition of teams and whether teams could, or individual companies or individual people could be part of one or multiple teams. There's no restriction on that.
And we have a participant online who would like to speak, Bob Cuneo. Bob, your mic is now enabled. You'll have to unmute yourself and then you'll have the same 3 minutes and back and forth.
Okay, well, thank you so much. And my question concerns the political barriers that would be associated with any multi-state water import project. And I'm wondering, are of the law firms and of course HDR, which have been chosen to evaluate these proposals, do any of them have the authority to investigate with other states their willingness to support a project that would cross their state lines and possibly require that water be drawn from a surface, from a lake or a river somewhere else in the United States? And again, who among the group that has been selected has been authorized to approach other state governments and possibly the Army Corps of Engineers to explore this question?
Chelsea, can you go to that 3-phase one? So, Bob, the authority of any of WIFA's consultants just originates from what WIFA itself can do. What we've talked about publicly in our board discussions about this 3-phase process is one of the advantages of this 3-phase process is it allows WIFA to engage in government-to-government consultations during phase 2. Not during phase 1, that would be inappropriate for procurement, but in phase 2, under the task orders, when we have specific water importation projects, we can work with the individual proposers and identify what types of activities, similar to what you were talking about, are best done in a government-to-government role by WIFA and what are best done by the private sector. And so that's one advantage we've talked about publicly in this task order method.
Okay, so to clarify what you just said, Chuck, it's WIFA, it would be WIFA's responsibility to engage with other states to support a multi-state project, and it would not be, for instance, the responsibility of HDR to do that as part of the evaluation process. Did I state that correctly?
I would not make that distinction between HDR and WIFA. HDR is WIFA's consultant in this. And so any time they act on any of this, they're doing that on our behalf at our direction. If the question is a proposer or WIFA, that is something that can be discussed in phase 2 about what between the private sector partner and WIFA, which is the best or the most appropriate entity for some of those. And as I said, I believe some of those are best done on a government to government basis. And what we will discover is that WIFA would take on some of that responsibility, but it really depends on the individual water importation project, the geography, and other details.
Okay, well, Chuck, thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate it.
We have another question from an anonymous attendee online, and the question is, where do we indicate in our IQS what project category or categories we're self-selecting? I'm not seeing this on any of the forms we're to submit for the IQS.
That's a good question.
It is a good
And
question.
we'll have to refer to the solicitation document. And if we need to clarify that, we can.
Sorry to cut you off. Come on back.
Hey, I'm sorry, I'm back up a third time, but one question leads to another question. So thank you for your patience. Brenda, I want to refer to language. I'll just read it. Proposer selected through the solicitation and is also enters the subsequent LTWIP based contract with WIFA will be eligible to provide additional services to WIFA and potentially enter into an implementation agreement pursuant to the terms of the LTWIP based contract. I don't know if this is true, but to me, I read that as this is like a Department of Administration statewide contract that can be used for multiple purposes. Is that essentially true? I mean, does that mean other WIFA projects outside of the augmentation fund, or what exactly does that mean when it says potentially enter into to provide additional services and potentially enter into implementation agreement pursuant to the base contract?
No.
No.
This solicitation is specifically for the services associated with developing a water importation project.
Okay, and no other
This
WIFA.
solicitation is not designed to do other work with WIFA outside of
Okay,
the long-term water augmentation fund or an importation project.
And would not be a statewide contract.
okay. All right, that's great. Thank you for clarifying that.
Any other questions? Anything online?
No, online participants, if you do have questions, you're welcome to use the raise hand function or enter the questions in the Q&A box, either one. There's still plenty of time if you think of something in the next few minutes.
Well, since there's no more questions, I want to thank you all for participating today, and thank you for allowing me to read from a prepared statement. We appreciate your engagement and thoughtful questions raised here during this pre-offer conference. Should you have any other additional questions or clarifying questions that you need answered, again, please submit them in writing through the formal Q&A process we discussed today. Again, we encourage you to review all the solicitation documents thoroughly. And again, that is a note from your procurement officer. We look forward to receiving your proposals, and we thank you for your interest in partnering with WIFA in this exciting project. And if there's no other questions, we will now conclude this session. And thank you again for your time today.